Adidas and Puma are two of the most famous sports brands in the world. But, its main office is in a village in Germany. Why? Well, because these two companies have a long history of betrayal, sabotage, and honestly, extreme fighting between the two brothers. Adolf and Rudolf Dassler, two brothers, started competing shoe companies and became fierce enemies. Adidas and Puma fought each other like they were playing chess for the rest of their lives. This family feud has kept the community where they were born divided between fans of Adidas and Puma. The story is about lies, secrets and corruption that date back to the two world wars. It tells how the brothers joined the Nazi Party and helped Hitler's army make weapons, brothers by blood, but separated by greed and ambition, the crazy true story of Adidas and Puma. Rudi Dassler was born into a poor family in 1898. His brother Adolf, who was also known as Adi, was born 2 years later. The brothers had a hard time growing up in a German village where they made shoes. His job at the shoe factory didn't pay enough to support the family. Their mother ran a small laundry business out of their home. She would wash the clothes, and Rudi and Adi would take them to the people in the town. People started calling them the Los Angeles Boys. But later, the brothers were drafted into the German army to fight in World War I. When they came back home, their mother's business had lost customers, and the German economy was in ruins. Eddie came up with a way to help the family during this disaster. He had always loved sports and wanted to work at the shoe company like his dad. Back then, people didn't have special shoes for every activity. Eddie thought about making running shoes with metal spikes. It helps athletes. Eddie turned his mother's laundry shed into a shoe store. He gathered materials from the last battlefields because he didn't have any money or materials, and the city's power grid was broken. He used leather from soldiers' helmets, threads from broken parachutes, and anything else he could find. He hooked up a bicycle wheel to the leather cutting machine so he could use it without electricity. He told his friend to ride a bike to get energy. Eddie's idea led to the making of very strong shoes that became well known in his community. He was so obsessed with the little things that he tried out new materials and made sure every detail of the shoe was perfect. He saw that his project had a lot of potential. Rudi, his brother, quit his job to be with him. Rudi was more outgoing and friendly, so he sold things while Eddie designed and made them. They worked well together. During the power outage, Adi hooked up a leather cutting machine to a bicycle wheel and had his friend ride it to power it. Adi used this idea to make shoes that were very strong, and they became well known in his city. He was so obsessed with the small details of design that he tried out different materials and made every part of the shoe. He understood that his project could do a lot of good. Rudi, his brother, quit his job to be with him. Rudi was in charge of sales because he was more outgoing and charming, while Adi was in charge of design and production. This seemingly perfect partnership started the Gebrüder Dassler sports shoe company in 1924. They started Adidas together in 1924. Nobody thought that this partnership would lead to a family fight and two shoe empires around the world. Rudi sent Dassler sneakers to all the sports clubs in Germany, which boosted sales. The brothers moved from the attic to a factory that had better technology and more workers. They learned how to make high-quality shoes and then joined the football shoe business as it grew in popularity. Rudi gave free shoes to a few teams, knowing they would want more after trying them. Adi made the shoes better while Rudi sold them, which helped the business. Things really changed when Hitler came to power in 1933. The Nazis, you see, started pushing sports and fitness to make the country stronger and to get ready for war. That made people want more athletic shoes, obviously. The Dassler brothers were in a good position to take advantage of this new demand. At the time, it was necessary for business owners in Germany to join the Nazi Party, which Adi and Rudi did. But Evidence shows that they were real followers of Hitler. Rudi was open about his support for the Nazis. Adi didn't say much, but he was very active in Hitler Youth activities. In any case, the Nazis' support for the athletic shoe industry was a huge help to their business. The brothers' biggest break came in 1936 when Germany hosted the Olympics. The brothers thought that the first Olympic Games broadcast would be a good business opportunity. The best way to advertise around the world would be for Olympic athletes to wear their sneakers. They wanted Jesse Owens, a world-class athlete, to wear their shoes. Owens was a world-class athlete, but it was risky to support him. Hitler wanted the Aryan race to win at the Olympics, so a black athlete winning would go against what he wanted. Adi kept going. He saw Jesse Owens in the Olympic Village and talked to him for a few minutes before giving him a custom running shoe. Owens agreed to wear the shoe in competitions. Back then, commercial sponsorship was different, and athletes were happy to get free shoes without having to pay. Jesse Owens won 4 gold medals thanks to Dappler sneakers. The brothers' shoes made a lot of money, even though they made Hitler mad and destroyed Nazi propaganda. The best Olympic athlete wore these sneakers, which led to orders from all over the world. But things got worse between the brothers behind the scenes. The Dassler plant was at its best, but disagreements about how to run the business started to put a strain on their relationship. Rudi said that the business wouldn't have done well without his sales skills, but Eddie thought that his design and quality were the most important things. World War II put a lot of stress on people. German businesses had to help the war, so Dassler made shoes and parts for the Nazi army. Eddie took over the factory because he was better at managing production, but Rudi thought his brother was trying to get rid of him. The brothers and their wives and kids all lived in the same house, so the problem was more than just work. Things got more tense and arguments got worse. One night, when Allied bombers hit Germany, Eddie and his wife hid in the cellar. There they found Rudi and his wife. Then Eddie mumbled, to help the war effort, Dassler started making Nazi army shoes and parts. Adi took over the plant because, well, he was just better at managing production, but Rudi thought his brother was trying to get him fired. The brothers worked together and lived in the same house with their wives and kids. The mood got worse and fights happened more often. One night, while Allied bombers were hitting Germany, Adi and his wife ran to the cellar. Adi said something to himself when he saw Rudi and his wife. Later he said that scoundrels meant Allied bombers, but Rudi thought it was a dig at him and his wife. After that, their relationship was horrible. Eddie ran the factory, which started making tank parts, while Rudi was sent to war. Rudi thought Eddie was going to take over the company from the front. He wrote to management to ask that his wife speak for him, and said that Eddie wasn't a good leader. Eddie said no. Rudi took a chance by telling the Nazis that Eddie was stockpiling leather instead of making army shoes as tensions grew. For using it to make shoes for the army, which is a big crime during wartime, they took Eddie in for a short time and questioned him. The Allies looked at thousands of Germans for Nazi crimes after the war as part of denazification. Rudi was put in a wartime internment camp for a year because of his ties to the regime. He was angry that his brother didn't help him or try to set him free. Later, the Americans said that Rudi's arrest was based on a tip-off, which made Rudi even more sure that Eddie had told them to do it to get rid of him. After Rudi was let go, Adi had to go through a special trial for making money off the conflict. Rudi was quick to tell the police what his brother had done. Adi said he was innocent of all charges, and the brothers were found not guilty. The damage was done, and they were now enemies instead of brothers. Rumours about Rudi and Adi's wife having an affair made things worse. It was hard to tell what was true and what was made up because there were so many claims this time. But after all the fights and betrayals, the brothers couldn't work together anymore. After months of hard talks, the brothers decided to split the company in 1948 instead of working together. They divided the money and started Adidas and Puma. Then they did anything they could to win. Adi took the first part of his family name, Dassler, and added it to his nickname, Adi, to make Adidas. The name may be pronounced differently in different countries. Rudi changed the name of his company from Ruda to Puma because he thought that athletes wanted to be like the Puma animal. Puma. But splitting a company in two was hard, and workers had to choose between two brothers. Most of the engineers and technicians went with Adi, and most of the salespeople went with Rudi. The river that ran through their small town of Herzogenaurach split it in half. The town was forever split after Adidas and Puma opened. Each side had its own school and neighbourhood. It was common for the kids of Adidas and Puma workers to go to different schools. People were suspicious of each other's social interactions. School gangs formed around shoes, and it was almost a crime to wear Pumas in Adidas or the other way around. People used to look at each other's shoes to see which side they were on, and if they would talk to them. This is how the town got the name town of Bent Necks. The mayor was the only one who wore Adidas and Puma shoes at official events to stay neutral. At first, Adidas and Puma sneakers were the same, but then Adidas added creativity. They were suspicious, and school gangs formed over different types of shoes. In Adidas, it was almost against the law to wear Puma shoes, and the other way around. People began looking at each other's shoes to see which side they were on, and if they would talk to them. This is how the city got the name the City of Bent Necks. The mayor, who wore Adidas and Puma shoes to public events, was the only person who didn't pick a side. Adidas and Puma shoes were the same, but Adi added 3 leather stripes to his sports shoes to make them more stable. He put 3 leather stripes on his sports shoes to make them more stable. He painted these stripes white in 1900, which made Adidas shoes stand out and become popular, setting them apart from Puma. The brothers started a fierce fight for Germany's sports shoe industry after each brand had a clear identity. Germany's preparation for the first World Cup after the war was a great chance. Rudi knew the coach of the German national team and wanted to make sure that the players wore Puma shoes, but they couldn't come to an agreement about money. Rudi thought the coach would give in, but he was wrong. Instead, the coach talked to Adi. The German national team wore clothes from Adidas. People didn't expect much from the German team because they didn't do well. Everyone was shocked when the team made it to the final match. It looked like their luck would run out against the Hungarian team, which hadn't lost in 4 years. Adi was very happy because he had made shoes for the German national team that could be changed by taking off the studs. Rudi hoped that the coach wouldn't sign a deal with Adidas, but he did. The German national team wore clothes made by Adidas. Because they didn't do well, no one expected much from the German team. The team shocked everyone by making it to the final game. They thought they would lose to the Hungarian team, which hadn't lost in 4 years. Adidas had made a new shoe for the German national team that could be changed by adding different studs to the bottom. This was great news. To switch out the bottom of the shoe, which is called an adjustable stud shoe. They were very stable on wet grass for the players. Germany had a hard time in the last game after giving up 2 early goals. The Hungarian players lost their balance as the mud and ground got wetter, but the Germans ran calmly in their special shoes. Germany scored the first goal, then the second, and finally the game-winning goal in the last few minutes. West Germany's unexpected victory was a sports miracle, and for the first time since the war, the German people were proud again. One of the happiest cultural events in the country. After this victory, Adidas became a national hero, and the company's reputation grew because the players wore Adidas shoes. There was a huge demand for Puma. Rudi was heartbroken when he missed a great chance to promote Puma. 2 years later, customs unexpectedly held up a shipment of Puma shoes for the Melbourne Olympics, while Adidas's shipment went through. This made things even worse between the two companies. People said that customs inspectors After the war, the Germans were proud again, one of the most fun cultural events in the country. Adi became a national hero when he won while wearing Adidas shoes, which also made his company more well known. There was a huge demand for Adidas. Rudy was heartbroken because he missed a great chance to promote Puma. 2 years later, customs unexpectedly held up Puma sneakers for the Melbourne Olympics, while Adidas's cargo went through. This made the two companies hate each other even more. People said that Adidas paid customs inspectors to stop Puma sneakers from being sold, which made most athletes switch to Adidas. Rudy was very angry that Adidas was getting all the attention, so the two companies started to compete with each other at every turn. This rivalry between the brothers pushed them to grow their businesses quickly. The fight spread to other countries as each business sold shorts, socks and sports shoes to people in other countries. There would be a race going on all the time because another company would copy what one did. The sons came in as both companies grew quickly. So Adidas actually paid players to stop selling Puma shoes, which, well, meant that most players ended up wearing Adidas shoes on the field. Rudy was absolutely furious that Adidas was getting all the attention, so, the two companies just fought for every single chance they could get. Because of their personal rivalry, the brothers worked even harder to grow their businesses, and that, honestly, led to their competition spreading to countries all over the world, not just Germany. They put on their shorts, socks and athletic shoes, ready for battle, so to speak. Whenever one company did something new, the other would copy it, and that just started a race that never really ended. As both companies grew rapidly, their sons joined the fray. Arman, who was Rudy's son, took charge of Puma, while Horst, Eddie's son, led Adidas. This new generation, well, they didn't make things any better. In fact, they made them worse. Horst and Arman, just like their dads, quickly found reasons to hate each other. In the 1960s, both companies spent a fortune on fancy meals and public relations just to get the best athletes to wear their shoes. It really got out of hand. Horst and Arman ended up spending a lot of money bidding on athletes to sponsor at the 1968 Olympics. This drove costs up and profits down. The sky-high prices and shrinking profits, honestly, were all because of those wild bidding wars to sponsor athletes. So Horst and Armin secretly agreed not to sign Pelé before the 1970 World Cup in Mexico. Pelé was widely considered the best soccer player in the world, and, well, signing him would have changed the game for either company. The brothers decided that Pelé should remain neutral, not sponsored by anyone, because another bidding war could have put them both out of business. But then, millions of people were stunned when Pelé walked onto the field in Puma sneakers during the World Cup quarter-finals. As the teams were getting ready, every camera was on Pelé. He actually asked the referee to pause the game before the whistle, knelt down and carefully tied his shoes. The Puma logo was right there on the screen, catching the eyes of millions of viewers all around the globe. It was brilliant indirect advertising. No words needed. Adidas had no idea that Puma had secretly signed a $125,000 deal with Pelé, which included that exact moment. Pelé went on to lead Brazil to World Cup victories, making Puma hugely popular and boosting their shoe sales worldwide for years. Horst, of course, was furious because Armin had broken their promise, and the bad blood between the two families only got worse. Eddie and Rudy, by then, were both 70 years old and hadn't spoken in years. Even though Rudy was dying of lung cancer, their dislike for each other never faded. Eddie refused to attend his funeral and never saw him again. Just a few years later, Eddie passed away too. So, this bit is part of the $125,000. Pelé then led Brazil to win the World Cup. which made Puma more popular and honestly made their shoes the best-selling shoes in the world for years. Horst was absolutely furious because Armin had clearly broken their agreement. The two families, well, they hated each other more than ever. Eddie and Rudy, on the other hand, were 70 years old and hadn't spoken in years. They still hated each other, even though Rudy was dying of lung cancer. Eddie didn't want to see him or even go to his funeral. Eddie passed away a few years later. The brothers were buried in the same cemetery but at opposite ends, so they never saw each other. After their founders died, their children ran Adidas and Puma. Horst and Armin had a hard time dealing with their parents' legacy. Under Horst, Adidas spent almost all of its money on sponsorship deals to beat Puma, ignoring what customers actually wanted. Armin led Puma in a frantic effort to keep up with Adidas's growth, but this hurt the quality of Puma's products. Both companies were having a tough time in the late 1970s and early 1980s, and by 1989 they were almost bankrupt. The kids sold the company to private investors. Even though the businesses were no longer owned by families, their stories of recovery were, quite different. Robert Louis Dreyfus, a Swiss businessman known for turning around struggling businesses, bought Adidas in 1993. He wants to bring Adidas back as a serious sports brand and make it popular. He came up with new ideas by making Predator sneakers and working with David Beckham. Both companies had a hard time in the early 1980s and were almost bankrupt by 1989. The kids sold the company to private investors. Even though the businesses were no longer owned by their families, their stories of recovery were different. Robert Louis Dreyfus, a Swiss millionaire, bought Adidas in 1993. Louis Dreyfus brought dying brands back to life. He wants to bring Adidas back as a serious brand for athletes and make it popular. He came up with new ideas by making Predator shoes and working with David Beckham, Bryant and Agassi. Adidas got back on track and bought Reebok for $3.8 billion in 2006. Adidas and Kanye West started the Yeezy line in 2013, and it quickly became a billion-dollar brand. Le Druif helped Adidas reach new heights and compete with Nike again. Kimzat, a German businessman, bought Puma in 1993. Puma grew into Formula One and recruited stars like Usain Bolt after focusing on product quality rather than competing with Adidas. The fastest in history, but more importantly, he made Puma a fashion icon by working with Alexander McQueen and hiring Rihanna as creative director. Puma was once again a billion-dollar brand in the middle of the 2010s. It was the third largest sportswear company after Nike and Adidas. The diesel conflict ended in 2009 with a friendly football match between the workers of Adidas and Puma in the founder's hometown. This was because the companies are no longer family-owned. CEOs playing together was a sign of peace. People still argue about Adidas and Puma on opposite sides of the river in the city where it all started. You wonder what would have happened if the brothers had worked together instead of fighting for years. They might have made the best sports brand. Nike did it instead. Across the river, Adidas and Puma fans still live in the city where it all started. What if the brothers had agreed? What if they had worked together instead of fighting for decades? They might have made the best sports brand. Nike, on the other hand, did it.